Hello, and God be with you. My name is Bill Hurst. I'm pastor of First Lutheran Church and School in Torrance, California. And welcome to the most sacred 8 days of the Christian year. During a time of year where other faith communities, for example, in Judaism, the coming of Passover this weekend. And of course, we've just completed the observance of Ramadan among our Islamic neighbors. This is one of those times of year, and especially for Christians, the 8 days that begin on Palm Sunday and that conclude on Easter Sunday are not only important, I mean, they stand right at the center of the faith claims of 20 centuries of Christian doctrine and theology, but believe it or not, the stories in the four Gospels, so that's Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, those 8 days comprise anywhere from 25% to fully 1/3 of those Gospels. So you've got an entire life that's being summed up in many, many of these chapters. But then those 8 days that begin with Hosanna and that then transition to the deep and awful cries of crucify, and then, of course, the beginning of the proclamation, risen indeed, 8 days. And in many Christian churches across the denominations, ours being a progressive Lutheran congregation, but throughout Christendom and all around the world, there are certain very important dates. And each year they begin with sundown on Thursday, and then through to Friday, then to Saturday, and then on to Easter Sunday. The first of these observances, Maundy Thursday. The word Maundy, it's kind of a strange word that we don't use very often, but that word Maundy comes from a Latin word, mandatum. It is the night of mandates. And so in the evening hour after supper, we hear, as Jews of faith, gather each and every year around the Seder, around the story of Pesach, of Passover, of the release of God's people from enslavement in Egypt. Jesus gathers with his disciples, with those with whom he has become so deeply attached, as their teacher, as their friend, and as the one who comes to arrive in Jerusalem on that Palm Sunday to the cries of Hosanna, save us, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And then at that Passover Seder meal, he breaks bread. Take and eat, he says, this is my body given for you. Or with the cup as the meal comes to its end, take and drink, the New Testament, the new covenant in my blood, given and shed for you and for everyone, for the remission and the washing away of sins. Do this as often as you eat and drink in remembrance of me. So Maundy Thursday, not only the mandate of this meal, whenever you gather for this meal, remember, and Christ comes. We believe in all his fullness, in the bread, in the cup, in the gathered community of those who would taste and see God's goodness. And then they go off to the Garden of Gethsemane, to Christ's arrest, and to the events that fall under that second of these 3 really important days, the Thursday, the Friday, the Saturday, what is called, again in Latin, the Triduum, Triduum, the great 3 days. So Maundy Thursday, the first of those great 3 days, and then Good Friday, or God's Friday, where we recall through the words of the Passion accounts from the Gospels, and through other of the New Testament writings about the suffering, about the way that the Roman system not only executed those who were found to be wrongdoers, but also in a horrific manner, in a way that was set to be a caution against anyone who would run afoul of the empire. And Christ suffers that, as Paul writes to the Philippian churches, death on a cross at that. And so on that day, God's Friday or Good Friday, Jesus goes to the cross, victorious. He is able to say at the very close of his last breaths of his human life, it is accomplished. And in the fulfillment of those promises, in the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, that's you and me, comes this amazing promise. His body is claimed by members of the elites in Jerusalem who can no longer go along with some of the worst instincts of the powerful men in that particular culture, as is so often the case with powerful men in any culture. They stand, they retrieve the body because that weekend, Passover, and the coming of Shabbat coincide. And so they must remove this body from the cross in order to faithfully observe this very sacred Shabbat. And they do. Something that many Christians do, certainly Roman Catholic, Anglican, Lutheran, and others, on the eve of Easter. So that's on Saturday after sundown, which in the way that Judean time is reckoned is actually the beginning of Sunday itself. We do something called the Great Vigil of Easter. And people gather in darkness for the lighting of the next year's paschal or baptismal candle. We gather together to hear a series of lessons that go from the very beginning of the creation story right on up through the prophets and up to the New Testament texts themselves. We remember our baptism, and we baptize in many cases that night, following the ancient practice of baptism during the Easter Vigil. And then we gather once more for the first Eucharist of the Easter season on that Saturday night. So there's a lot more to come, and we'll get to Easter Sunday in our next installment. But this week, this sacred week, these 8 days, have so much to teach us about the importance of remembrance, as is the case with every faith community, the things that we are bid to remember, bound to remember, but also the importance of these 8 days, from the waving of the palms to the shrieks of condemnation to the assertion that the Christ has been raised, and that because he lives, we too shall live. So that's enough for now. But what I would say, and what I would conclude in the same way as I conclude every worship service here in this place, God be with you till we meet again.